You're hearing it.
TNT.
Yes, we mandate that the truth be told, and that is what we try and do day in and day out. And I'm very happy to be joined again here today on TNT by the one and only Dr.Teck Khong. He's coming back. Last time we had a chat was an open line. We only had 10 minutes. We've got a little bit longer today, so we'll be able to delve a little deeper into some of the issues that are very close to our hearts. Dr. Khong is a former police surgeon and also an NHS doctor, ex-NHS doctor. He's also the leader of the ADF, which is the Alliance for Democracy and Freedom. He became involved in politics because of a decline in the NHS and also the state of our country now. And dare I say this, I'm sorry to say this, Dr. Khong, but since you did become involved in politics for those very reasons, things have just gone from bad to worse. Not because you're involved in politics, by the way, just simply because of the trajectory that the NHS is currently on.
Good morning, Rick. Good morning. Good to be back on here again.
You're welcome. So tell me this, there's a report in which in particular I had a look at yesterday. Now, this is based on a hospital in Ireland, but it's also reflective, I think, of what's happening on the NHS and the whole. I want to get your thoughts and opinions on this one. So there's a hospital in Ireland in Limerick. So University Hospital of Limerick has once again reached a new record high of patients waiting on trolleys, with the figure reaching a new high of 138. That was just 2 days ago. So in one hospital in Ireland, in Limerick, University Hospital of Limerick, they had 138 patients that were waiting on trolleys. This exceeded a recent high of 132. The figures come from the daily tally known as Trolley Watch, which is compiled by the Irish Nurses and Midwives Organisation. And according to the data, there were a total of 683 patients at all Irish acute hospitals today without a bed, which is the highest figure in 2024 so far. Now, I know it's Ireland, it's not the NHS, it's the Irish Health Service, but that's the same situation that we're seeing in many, many hospitals in England too. It's almost a given that you could well end up on a trolley for several days if you go to a hospital in England. How has it got to that point, Dr. Khong? How has it fallen so far from what it used to be?
Right. Thank you, Rick. The problem can be divided into four segments. Basically, you have patients coming into the hospital, whether it's the outpatient clinic, the elective list, or the accident emergency department. So we got patients coming in. You've got to ask yourself, why are patients or increased numbers of patients going in? Well, one of the issues is these people have lesser access to the GP surgeries. So we have a bottleneck created by people bypassing the surgery rooms straight into casualty, apart from which you already have a building waiting list. Then you have the management situation in the hospital. Now, in that, we have planning hindrances. You have people who are not managing the rota system properly. You have staffing issues. And then at the other end, you have patients waiting to be discharged. Now, the waiting to be discharged is a very interesting section of the population, because you have delays in actually getting results, delays in getting a proper diagnosis, and delay in instituting treatment. So it's very wrong to blame patients for bed blocking when quite often it's the poor and slow decision-making process, or inadequate or inefficient decision-making process, that slows the process down. So we have a throughput situation where more than desirable numbers of patients come in because of poor management out in the community. So they all logjam in the hospital, front door. And then while in hospital, you have the mishmash of problems which needs to be sorted out, and then the throughput. Now, I think what's happened is, I think both in Ireland and in the NHS, what we witnessed was during the pandemic, there was further degradation of a service already in decline. And that's very sad. Now, the politicians will do knee-jerk reactions, say, oh, we're short of beds. That's why, patients aren't going onto the beds. Well, that's a little bunkum, because what it is they need to look at where the situation is causing the problems. If the bed situation is insufficient, fair enough, invest more money, have more beds. But quite often, having worked on wards in the hospital, I can tell you, it is a situation with poor decision and poor throughput. No patient want to stay on the wards longer than is necessary, and patients want to get better to resume normal life. So you've got to get them out back in the community.
Mhm.
Now, as far as sorry,
Yeah, sorry, go ahead. Yep. I
as
thought
far
you'd
as
finished.
actually reducing the blocks in the community, what we need to do is to look at how doctors work. And I'm afraid, when I first became a GP, my job was dedicated to looking after the patients. The majority of my income came from capitation. Very little was due to meeting targets. But towards the end of my career, the majority of income came from meeting targets, so-called quality outcome points, QOF points. So what happens is doctors became more and more engrossed in actually meeting the targets because the finances depended on meeting the targets. I don't blame the doctors, but I blame the system. We have changed financial incentivization into a nasty beast, which it shouldn't be. So
No.
if you, for example, Google the 2023/24 GP contract, you find two doctors discussing how best to maximize your income. When I would suggest this, the doctors are there not to maximize income. The income should flow in if they do the job properly with the patients.
Yeah. Yeah. And once you introduce financial incentives to someone doing a job, I used to work for a large financial institution. So I was a financial advisor and I was remunerated depending on how much business I brought in and the type of business that I brought in. Some of it paid better money than others. So there was a natural gravitation as a money hungry young man trying to make his way in the world for me to sell as much profitable products as possible, sometimes at the detriment of the client's best interest. And once you start to mix in financial incentives with pushing a certain type of product or service, you're always going to see a suffering in the actual quality of the services being provided. And that's bad enough when it comes to people's finances, Tech. But when it comes to people's health, and you have people talking about maximizing their income, maybe at the detriment of people's health, that's when you know you're in very dire straits when it comes to any particular health service. We've got to take a little headline break, and I appreciate your honesty and your openness here, because these are the questions. People are scratching their heads at the minute, wondering why things are happening. Why is there a degradation of services? Why is this not happening? And you're outlining the actual reasons why it's happening based on your experience working in the system yourself. So we've got to take a brief pause for headlines, and when we come back, I want to pick up on a few other things that you've actually said, because I think it's very enlightening for people to hear this from someone that's been in that position themselves, which is you, an ex-GP and police surgeon. So please stay tuned for more. We'll be right back after this break here with Dr. Teck Khong and TNT, today's News Talk.
This is TNT Radio.
So we were just about to have a conversation during the break. It's very, very difficult to stop talking when you're in conversation with someone and you're enjoying the conversation. Even when the breaks come up, we still keep talking anyway. But I was mentioning to Tech just during the break that how different things have been. Even I can remember when I was a kid, if you had a bad throat, or your mum would phone the GP, they would do a house visit. They would come out with a big black bag, whip the stethoscope out, have a check out, that have a prescription pad in there, that write your prescription. You could go to the chemist and get it seen to. There was care in the community when it came to GPs. Now it's an absolute chore, even trying to get to a receptionist for a GP who will then triage you and maybe deem you worthy to speak to a GP. Then you could be waiting for weeks to see a GP. Is this what we've been conditioned to accept now? People realize it's not acceptable, but have we been conditioned to accept it as the new normal?
That's very unfortunate. You see, the whole system of healthcare delivery, the NHS, and I presume with the Irish system as well, it's predicated on a tripartite compact, which is the government taxing the people to pay the doctors to look after the patients. And it has become a very dominant system of delivery, which in a way, taxation offers the largest pool and the most effective way of pooling money to look after the people. But the trouble is the government then becomes too monolithic and dictates. And that's where problem arises, because what it is people's needs are forgotten. You mentioned about the old days when a doctor sees a problem, deals with it. If you deal with, in fact, if people live healthily, there'll be less problems. But if they had the misfortune of getting a problem, if it's dealt with effectively and efficiently early on, no matter how much it costs, downstream, the cost and the misery is far reduced. So we need to look at how population behaves. So we have the tripartite compact. The government needs to sort itself out. The patients need to sort themselves out, and the doctors need to be rewarded appropriately for doing the right things. The doctors are not here to look after the government; they are here to look after the patients, and that is the primary importance. And we should reward people with clarity of thinking, sharp acumen, and getting people right. The compassionate link between the patient and the doctors, the traditional, what people call the patient-doctor relationship, has been so badly sullied by perverse incentives. We need to get back to the basics of looking after people. There's no high power side. Now, I tell you this, there is not a single political party or a politician in all the 40 years of my career looking at this in the right, cogent way. If there was, I would not need to be in politics at all. So that is why I'm determined to help my party get into Parliament and sort the mess out for the people of Britain.
Tell us about the ADF, because although we have extra time here this morning, it's still flown by like a rocket. I could talk to you all day here about different issues. In fact, there's a lot of other things. You mentioned one last thing. You talked about the patient. The patient sometimes is not looked upon as being an unnecessary burden in the system. And what I mean by that is there's a very shift these days towards sedentary lifestyles, eating processed fast food, not getting enough exercise, not looking after ourselves, and depending then on the doctors or the government that if they do take bad or they do take heart disease or diabetes, that they'll be prescribed medication from it, it'll get surgery for it, that'll put them back onto their feet. I think there needs to be a hell of a big push towards preventative action being taken to stop people, as you say, flowing downstream and clogging up the system there. But again, the government has a big part to play in that, because they're not pushing healthy messages enough. They're trying to come up with how do you say, treatments for problems rather than trying to avoid the problems in the first place. Now, let's move from that on to politics. You're part of leader of the ADF, which is the Alliance for Democracy and Freedom. Where are you guys standing on all this at the minute? If I could wave a wand tomorrow, there's a general election probably going to happen in May. Your party has an overwhelming majority. Teck Khong is the new Prime Minister of the UK. What are you going to do? What's your first protocol when it comes to sorting people's health out?
Well, thank you, Rick. I think you're very optimistic. I have no desire or facing the reality that we become government on the first outing. No. What we need to do is to actually encourage people to think differently. We want to move away from a duopoly, which, they're trying to outcompete each other in ways that are fundamentally wrong. So what we need to do is, as in health, as in other things, we need to look at where the problems are and what the problems are to deal with them effectively. So when we look at health, for example, we've had huge spending increases since Labour came into power back in 97, which went from £37 billion a year to well over £200 billion a year as it stands now. And we're wasting money. We're wasting money left, right, and center. We are not looking at the problems correctly. Over and above which we have this big problem with pandemic. Now, we spend a huge amount of money. We're not achieve anything at all. And we also cause problems with lockdowns, with questionable issues over safety and efficacy of the vaccine. But that's another chapter. That's another talk. What we want to do is to encourage people to think that there are other parties like the ADF who have their interests at heart. We're not here for our glorification. We're not here to serve ourselves. We don't have a party whip. We tell our candidates, if you're elected, the whip is your electorate, your constituents. They tell you what they want, you go with them. There will be some outlying framework for national policies on how we're going to spend the money, how we're going to defend the country, and so on. But primarily, you have to listen to your electorate, what they want. If they say we'll have an encampment of immigrants here, we'll do that. But if they said we don't want immigrants here, you also do that. You've got to go with the flow, the request of the people. So the first thing is to say we devolve the democracy to the locality. So it's the first act of direct democracy. We run we run the party very much local direct democracy lines. We don't have a whip.
And also, of course, people sometimes, they rely on the electorate to get them elected. And then as soon as they get elected, then the first people that they dismiss and discount are the people that actually put them in the position in the first place. So that's interesting that the whip is the actual electorate would have come to the party. We're almost up to time here, so want to try and direct people your way. So if you're interested in what Teck's saying here, you can check out the party's website, which is ADF Party, all one word, .uk. And also, if you use the Twitter platform, they're on there at ADF Party. So please take the time and go on there and do that. And probably throughout the course of this year, as politics becomes more and more dominant in current affairs discussion, the next time we talk, maybe hopefully sooner rather than later, we'll put a focus on the political side of things that you're doing, because I've been very interested to get your views as a surgeon and an ex-NH doctor on the NHS, but maybe we'll put the shift more on the political side of things if you're good enough to come back at some stage in the future. What do you think of that?
Fantastic, Rick. I look forward to that.
Good man. And that's Dr. Teck Khong. And you can also, by the way, you can also follow him on the X platform or the Twitter platform at Dr. Teck Khong, Khong. Go and check him out there, please, and spread the word about the ADF. So big thanks to you, Dr. Khong. Hope you have a great day, and we'll stay in touch and hopefully talk sooner rather than later. You're welcome. I got to take a break right now and welcome in the wonderful Louise Creffield from Save Our Rights UK. She's going to be talking about legislations and bills that are currently being passed when we come back after this break on TNT.